I think we could. There's still one person that's joining. She's not able to enter the room quite yet, and then after she joins, I think we can begin. And maybe Irina, maybe you could do just a brief introduction, and talk a little bit about our debt to the Russian American Cultural Center and to Regina and to everyone involved.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, one even doesn't need to remind me.
Okay, good.
I remember this debt every day.
Oh yes, absolutely.
No, I just wanted to. So we're pretty much beginning, right?
Yes, just let's wait 1 second because Stephen is having some trouble entering. Well, I think we can begin now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're very happy to be here to launch the 11th volume of Cardinal Points, which is a journal that I've been editing for a few years, but was founded some time ago by Oleg Woolf and Irina Mashinski. And now I'll invite Irina to just say a few words about the origin of the journal and also to say something about the collaboration with our host. Oh, we can't quite hear you, Irina. Is there something?
How about now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. So hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us, especially since it's on the East Coast. It's midday, and I know it's hard. I would just say a few words about for those who's unfamiliar with the quite weird story of this history, rather, of this publication. It all started in 2005 when Oleg Woolf envisioned a Russian journal, which became Stormy Sveta, and I invited me to co-edit it, and then so we published quite a few issues, and in 2010 we decided to publish just one experimental English language issue. It was just an issue of Stormy Sveta, and called it naturally Cardinal Points, which is just very straightforward translation of Stormy Sveta with some new overtones, obviously, that appear in English. And then we were overwhelmed with the material. We published right away 2 volumes simultaneously, and then we realized that the interest was so genuine and so great that we decided to continue with that. So it became an entirely separate publication, entirely separate journal, Cardinal Points. And after in 2018 or so, we became the journal Brown University Slavic department. So starting with the 6th issue. And by the way, I need to show you this is the historic first issue of Cardinal Points, 2010. So the rest is history. In 2019, we stopped, the older sibling retired. This is the last issue of Stormy Sveta, so it's retired and started traveling, dealing with its hobbies and doing all pleasant things, and while the Cardinal Points is continuing to work. And so here we are in after Oleg's death in 2011, Regina kindly approached me and offered help. And since then, we have been inseparable partners. We've done countless events, and I'm really grateful. It's just it's very sincere. I'm very grateful to you, Regina, to Roman, and to the center. So with that, I think we can continue with the real stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. It's been my great honor to edit Cardinal Points for now I think 4 years, and it's the latest issue, which is what we're here to launch. It seems to get better and better every year. This issue has several treasures that I'm very happy to share with you today, and we've invited the authors of these pieces, the translators, to read their work and to explain the import of these texts. I think I'll begin with Kevin. Kevin, could you say a few words about yourself and your contribution to the journal, which is a cycle of sonnets by the great Polish poet Adam Mickiewicz?
Just give me a time frame. How long do I have? I heard something about 4 minutes.
About 4 minutes is right. About 4 minutes is right. But if you get carried away on the romantic wave of inspiration,
okay,
we'll stem the tide.
It was also very interesting at the very beginning to be bombarded by lots of Russian, which I do to a certain extent understand because I've been to Moscow probably 70, 80 times in the course of my professional life. So there's a part of my soul that's Russian too. So just figured it felt good to hear that again. What I'm going to read and present to you today is just a little bit about the Crimean Sonnets written by Poland's national bard Adam Mickiewicz. It was written when he was 26, trip through the Crimea, and I've chosen 2 poems out of that cycle. And as the scholar Roman Koropetsky has pointed out, many of the sonnets they come in pairs, and the pairs are often united by either a theme or a geographical place. And it was very interesting translating that too, to try to understand what the place meant or what the theme meant and try to get that into English in the best way possible. I started this because I did not find an English translation that I was happy with, and figured I'm going to give it a shot from my side. And with lots of help from Boris, we got it to a point where it was publishable. The 2 that I've chosen are from a place in the Crimea called Bhakti-Saray. And the 2 sonnets are in Polish Bhakti-Saray, same title, and Bhakti-Saray v nocy, so at night. And this was the capital of the Crimea at the time, where the Girai Khans had their palace. And Bhakti-Saray just means garden of palace, or palace of gardens, yeah? And the Crimean sonnets often come in pairs, as I've mentioned. The first that I'm going to read you is a description of the desolate state of the palace of the historical Crimean rulers. And as Roman Koropetsky says in his essay about this, these are there to express the sublimity of ruins, picturesque reminders of man's and his creation's inconsequentiality in the face of time. So this is a description of what he sees, and actually Mickiewicz had the honor of sleeping at this palace. There was an opportunity for him and his fellow travelers to sleep there. So, as mentioned, the title Bhakti-Saray starts this way. Still grand, this palace of Girai stands desolate, where once the brows of pashas burnished these stone halls, filled with divans, proud thrones, and coves of love. There crawls a brood of reptiles now, and locusts congregate. Through colored windows, bindweed creepers penetrate and coil into the ceiling vaults and clutch the walls. And nature thus reclaims the works of men. It scrawls ruin, like ghost hand meting out Belshazzar's fate. A vessel carved from marble still adorns the court, a harem fountain, which, despite the waste around, continues to drip pearly tears and to exclaim, where have you fled, love, power, earthly fame? You should endure forever. but soft water sound is all that still remains. Oh, shame, your time was short. So that was the first of the two. And what the next one does, you move then to an actual image of the palace at night. And it is an excellent vignette of the city, utilizing Oriental and Islamic imagery to evoke the exotic backdrop of Crimea, the land through which Mickiewicz is traveling as a pilgrim. And he uses that term pilgrim very often. The names and images, mosques, muezzins, harems, minarets, iblis, faris, would have been foreign to his Polish readers. But Mickiewicz annotated the Crimean Sonnets with copious notes to provide information and context. This one here is called Bhakti-Saray at night. The pious faithful leave the mosques in silent flows. The muezzin's voice dissipates into the night. Abashed, the dusk glows ruby red. In silver light, the moon entreats his mistress to a soft repose. In heaven's harem, stars arrayed in shining rows illuminate in sapphire space a cloud in flight, which like a sleepy swan with breast of gold and white, floats on a lake of black and in the moonlight glows. The shadows fall from cypress crowns and minarets, while granite giants tower in ebon arc around, arrayed on Iblis' black divan like Satan's seed under the tent of darkness. Sometimes without sound, lightning bolts like white arrows launched from craggy heights pierce the blue desert, swift as Faris on his steed. So that was it. Those are 2 of the 18. A lot of them are very similar in imagery and in tone. They are all in the Petrarchan sonnet form, which is very demanding for anybody who's ever tried to use that form. Very demanding from a rhyme standpoint. I see that, here I am surrounded primarily by Russian speakers, and this is a Polish work. So I don't know how many of you have read Mickiewicz in the original, but it was a pleasure translating it. And again, thanks to Boris. And also I would like to say a word of thanks to my professor at Stanford, Katarina Mommsen, who was the one who actually inspired the whole thing by her gift and by encouraging me to do this.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for that presentation. And I want to say that you were very humble when you described the final product as publishable. I think publishable is the least of it. I happen to know quite a few translations of this cycle myself, and yours is head and shoulders above every other version that I've seen. It really is a masterpiece of translation. The original cycle was written in 1826. What you've done, I think, especially well is without modernizing it, you've made it sound fresh. You've retained the formal elements of the original that were appropriate to the English ear, but did away with some of the other restrictions that have, I think, held other translators back. So you found a middle ground between the demands of the original and demands of the target language. And that's really what we hope to see from all the translators who contribute to our journal. I think that's what we stress, is that these are translations that exist not for people who can appreciate the original exclusively. These translations exist for those who do not have access to the original and want to share in the beauties of the cultures that we represent. So bravo, really is a wonderful thing to have done, a wonderful thing to have shared with us, and we're very happy to spread the wealth.
Thank you.
And I think it's important that the people gathered here are all translators. They're translators and yet translator poets, I would say, translator authors. They've all made original contributions as far as we're concerned to the journal. Without their words, there would be no journal. So thank you all for being here. I think on that note, I'd like to introduce James. James, could you say a few words about your contribution to this volume, perhaps also about your contribution to previous volumes of Cardinal Points and your history with Irina?
Yes, thank you so much, Boris. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. And Kevin, beautiful poetry. Those Mickiewicz poems were really among the highlights of the issue for me. So I guess I'd like to begin my comments just by saying thanks to the organizers, to everybody who's joining in the event. And I think it's wonderful that this is an in dual celebration of Oleg Woolf, and that we're able to really assess collectively with every issue how much more the phenomenon of cardinal points is becoming precious, multi-layered through the editors, authors, and supporters. And it's really a delight for me to be able to join in this gathering again from St. Petersburg. As it turned out, I thought I was going to be back in California right now, but here it is. It's 10:25 in St. Petersburg, and I'm sitting in the editorial office of Approximate Blues, an alternative magazine which really respects Cardinal Points, and I've worked with for years. And it's about exactly the scenario that I was in a year ago, sitting here in COVID and wondering how am I going to tell the story of the discovery of the legacy of this poet, Anna Alekseeva, from the 1910s through mid 40s, who went entirely unpublished, and all of her poetry was suddenly discovered just last year during COVID. That's a simplification of a very complex story, which is told in the Art of Translation in Cardinal Points 11. But that's more or less what's happened. It's miraculous and so helpful to be able to work with Boris and Irina and others to make sure that some of those stories get told. We all know that behind the scenes of any translation, there's an absolute epic, often including the revisions to the translation, and to pull together all those threads and into the narrative that they really form in a compelling way is exceptional. So I'd like to give a brief presentation today from the Cardinal Points 11 on Alekseeva. Just read one of the 3 poems that appear in that issue, along with the translation essay. And I'd also like to sing a song of Oleg's, which appears in just print translation in the previous issue, Cardinal Points 10. And I thank Irina for introducing me to Oleg's poetry and to his singing. And if you all have not had the opportunity to encounter Oleg's voice, thanks to Irina, that voice has been preserved, and along with his guitar, you can look it up and be transported magically. I think conveys Oleg's spirit in such a rich way, his song. And I was not fortunate enough to meet him in life, but that's been my route to him through his music. Regarding Alekseeva and encountering her work, I'd like to acknowledge Carolyn Walden's, Boris Dralyuk's, and Maria Blashtain's translations. And it's wonderful that I see Maria, you're with us today. All these translations of Alekseeva preceded mine, and I'd like to highlight Maria Blashkin's anthology, 2020, Russia is Burning, where some of these translations appeared last year, an absolutely phenomenal watershed piece of work from Smokestack Books in London. And I'd also like to acknowledge Tatiana Apraxina, the editor-in-chief of Apraxin Blues, for her stewardship of Alekseeva's archives, as well as St. Petersburg State University and the Pushkin House for their roles in supporting this whole project of recovering the poetry. And I guess we all know that translation is personal, and for my own work on Alekseeva, my own relationship with St. Petersburg has been maybe one of the chief guiding elements. And I know that really for all of us, in some shape or form, that canon is present. Alekseeva lived in the city, and she died early as a result of the blockade of Leningrad. And the poem I'll read, she wrote in 1923 in memory of her teacher, Nikolai Gumilyov. This is the poem from which the essay in the most recent issue takes its name. A mangy mutt with tawny tufted ears has looked us in the eye and bolted out of alley gates to wind beside our heels with funny loping steps, a prancing goat. And now our walks a tallying of drunkards, a smearing of the sidewalk's muck. A ragamuffin bellows out a shanty, grabbing walls to prop himself up. A poor old crone at each pub door again stands watch, purse open, and greedily paws at the air, seeking ghosts of clinking coins. While you, arms stretching skyward, are reading the poem of poems, incantations that enchant the heart, a summons from street mud to Eden. Beneath your hole-dotted galoshes, slush squelches seeping in, and I want to join the beggar's sobs to seize the air's spare change. Alekseeva's poetry gives an opportunity to gauge the enduring power of spirit and art. The same is true of the legacy of Oleg Woolf. Here is a translation of Oleg's own musical setting, his poem, Nightingale, dedicated to Irina Mashinski. It is a poem of both shadows and light and ends darkly, but I would say the light also wins. So this is Solovey, and not sure how the guitar is coming through. Does that sound okay? Okay.
Yes, it sounds.
Nightingale, and not a lark you sing. In the midnight hour when the rubble scatters, starry rubble litters the Ural's dipper. But keep listening, and there's trills and twitters. But keep listening, and there's trills and twitters. Trills and twitters through a thin slot, a gap. Point of passage, rust-coated post, old religion thriving by thirsty grasp. Pines bolt down into life there from root through. Pines bolt down into life there from root through. Grown. Until the hatchet has notched the log. Past the noontime light livers wordlings open. Cast not darkness shadowing, creates its own. Sunlit twitters choral in singing solo. Sunlit twitters choral in singing solo. But as for me, a man who has gone outside, ordered places to pages where things are simpler, who returns to seek snow, wine, and finches flight. I find either axe blocks or heaps of cinders. I find either axe blocks or heaps of cinders. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you very much. I want to say one thing about James's contributions. His passion for these hidden voices, especially those that have gone unheeded for decades, is really inspiring. Every time he sends me something, be it an essay or a new translation, I feel behind the words of even the most rudimentary draft a great white heat of passion and commitment that over the course of one or two drafts becomes a brilliant shining diamond of a poem. So thank you, James, for all your work on behalf of these neglected authors.
Thank you. With your help, Boris, and with your help, Irina, and so many others.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say after James's presentation is that among the gifts that Cardinal Points brings me every year is the gift of connections, not only with the people that you see here, this community of creators, but also connections between contributions. One day I'll receive a note from Stephen Capus, who's just joined us, saying that he has a new translation of one of the masterpieces of 20th century Russian poetry on Akhmatova's Requiem, which he'll share with us shortly. Then the very next day, I'll receive something from Kevin about a cycle of verse from the 1820s translated from Polish. And then something from James about a poet who died as a result of the siege of Leningrad. And then the following day, I'll receive 3 original poems by a contemporary poet revisiting the Warsaw Uprising of the 1940s. And so you see how all of these pieces come together so perfectly into a mosaic of Eastern and Central European culture. How the poems written by a contemporary American poet that revisit Warsaw both echo the experience of Akhmatova and of Alekseeva, and also draw on the work of Mickiewicz, who is present in everything essentially written in Polish from the 1820s on. So those links are really a privilege for me to see unfold and form as I edit each issue. So with that, I'd like to introduce one of the vital links in the chain that is Cardinal Points Volume 11, which is Stephen Capus. Stephen Capus will offer a few words about Akhmatova and present his truly dazzling, remarkable translation, sensational translation of Requiem.
Can you hear me? Sorry for the uncertainty. This is my first time using Zoom, so I'm kind of learning it as I go along. I only discovered a couple of minutes ago that I had to activate the video camera, which is why you couldn't see me previously. Anyway, yeah, my contribution to Cardinal Points 11 is a translation of Anna Akhmatova's cycle of poems Requiem. It's a cycle that belongs to the later part of her career, when she'd broadened her poetic palette to include public political themes, in addition to the personal, private themes, which are characteristic of the early poems which made her name. I've always liked that. I've always loved Akhmatova. Way back when I first encountered Russian poetry as an undergraduate, she was the one that particularly appealed to me. I get the impression, maybe it's a mistaken impression, that she's not so much out of favor, but there's almost an idea that she's been done. We all know Akhmatova, and it's time to kind of move on to kind of more newer, less familiar poets. I actually sent some of my Requiem translations to another a magazine, and they responded by saying they liked the translations very much, but they felt that we'd already done Akhmatova, and they said, you know, don't you have anything, any translations of more recent contemporary poets? And my reaction was, yeah, I mean, certainly Akhmatova has been translated a lot. Sometimes well, sometimes not so well, but there's always room for more translations with a great poet like Akhmatova. So I'm pleased anyway to be able, with the help of Cardinal Points, to draw the attention of English-speaking readers to Akhmatova's poetry again. Yeah, Requiem is, as I said, it's a cycle of poems which Akhmatova wrote in the later part of her career, and it's a response to the events of the Great Terror of the 1930s, 1940s. I'll start, I think, with the introduction, which is a brief poem which it kind of evokes the atmosphere of Russia and Leningrad at that particular time. This was a time when the corpses all smiled as though glad to have died, when the city, reduced to an adjunct of its prisons, looked on from the side, when driven half crazy by suffering, the ranks of condemned shuffled by, and the trains on the point of departure whistled a song of goodbye. The star of death glimmered wanly, far below an innocent land, was trampled by blood-stained jackboots and crushed beneath black prison vans. As everyone will realize, my approach to translating Russian poetry is a fairly formal one. I try as far as possible to reproduce the formal patterns, the meters and rhyme schemes of the original Russian. Some translators feel a little bit uncomfortable about that. There's an idea that you sometimes encounter, which has it that English somehow is not compatible with kind of regular meters and regular rhyme schemes. which I'm skeptical about that idea. But certainly when translating Akhmatova, it seems to me that you need to reproduce her kind of her metrical and metrical patterns and rhyme schemes fairly closely. The next poem I'll read is, well, the next translation I'll read is a poem which Akhmatova wrote following, I think, the conviction of her son for whatever crime it was that he was supposedly guilty of. And it's about her efforts to kind of come to terms with it and make some kind of sense of it. It's called The Sentence. And I felt the heavy verdict, so long anticipated fall, on my living breast. No matter, I'll manage somehow. After all, I've so many chores to attend to. I must turn my heart into stone. I must liquidate all my memories and learn how to live alone. And if not, through the window summer is celebrating somewhere out of sight. I've foreseen it, this house so empty, on this day so desolate and bright. The next and final translation I'll read is the first poem of the epilogue. And it's a poem which, among other things, reiterates one of the great themes of Requiem, which is the idea of poetry as an affirmation of solidarity with the Russian the Russian people in the face of their trials and tribulations during the great Stalinist terror. So this is Epilogue 1. I learned how to read the meaning of downcast faces, to notice the way in which terror furtively peeks from beneath half-lowered lids, how suffering traces its stern cuneiform script on ravaged cheeks. How the hair which only the day before appeared, lustrously black, can turn ashen grey overnight. How smiles can fade on trembling lips and jeers, however dry, can betray a tremor of fright. And if I now venture to offer up this prayer, it's not for myself alone, but rather for all, who enduring the changing weather stood with me there, beneath the indifferent gaze of that blank red wall. I was in Petersburg a couple of years ago for the first time in a long time. And of course, I went to have a look at the statue to Akhmatova on the banks of the Neva. And I was amazed to see that if you look across the river, rising up in the distance, you can still see the blank red wall of the prison that Akhmatova refers to in this poem. Anyway, that's it from me.
Thank you, Stephen. That was excellent. The poem does deserve a fresh translation. I don't think that English speakers were able to read it fully until Stephen completed his version. And I've shared the poem also in my other publication, the LA Review of Books, where it's done extraordinarily well. You'll be happy to hear, Stephen. So whoever made the decision not to publish it in that other journal was not thinking straight. It really deserves to be seen and read, and thank you for sharing it with us. Now I think I'll switch course a bit and introduce Irina Steinberg, who will tell us a little bit about a prose translation that we included in this volume, a very moving story, part of a cycle of stories. Welcome, Irina.
Hello, hi everyone. Thank you, Boris. What an honor for our translation to form a part of this edition of Cardinal Points. And I say our because actually it's a collaborative translation with my colleague Sarah Jolly, who some of you know. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it to the launch tonight. But it's very much a joint effort that we made to translate this story, and are very, very happy to see it published in this journal. So the translation is of a writer called Polina Zhereptsova, who some of you may know. She's most famous for her diaries of the Chechen conflicts, the Chechen wars, if you like. She was born in Grozny in 1985, and she was 9 years old when the first of the wars broke out. And she kept a diary throughout the wars, all the way through to until she was 18, and moved out of Chechnya to claim asylum in Russia, and beyond. And it's the diaries that she is most famous for. They caused quite a stir when they were published in Russian, and led to a sort of campaign of discreditation against her, I would say, that eventually drove her out of Russia to claim asylum in Finland, where she now lives. But as well as the diaries, which have been fairly widely translated into dozens of languages, actually, she also writes short stories, and there's a particular collection of short stories called The Fine Silver Thread that Sarah and I have been working on translating. And that's where this short story comes from. And a lot of the stories, we call them sort of not autobiographical, but autofiction, I would say. They draw upon her own experiences. A lot of the episodes that she describes in the stories match those that she described in her diaries. A lot of them refer to a young girl called Polina growing up in Grozny. Others are written from sort of other types of people, and Polina tells me that there are stories that people had told her that she then put down on paper. So this is a short little story. I'll just read an extract sort of from the middle section. It's called We're Terrorists, and it's written in the first person from the point of view of a female suicide bomber. The task I have been assigned is to stealthily work my way as close as possible to the enemy. Wearing a floaty white dress, perfectly teamed with an elegant black jacket, I look as if I'm fresh off the catwalk in Milan. Before snapping shut the clasp, I take in one last breath of warm air and take one last look at the blue hills. Farewell. My friends have been tortured in interrogation camps. I must take revenge for that. An eye for an eye, blood for blood. So it was that Moses preached to us. So it was that 12 Chechen heroes took revenge in the winter of 1995 by throwing themselves under some Russian tanks and blowing them up. So it was that I too will take revenge. You know the protocol? Someone in a grey raincoat asks me. You mustn't take a seat until you are invited to. Here he comes. All right, thank you, I say, despising myself a little. When we speak in our mother tongue, our voices have a different tone. When we speak Chechen, it sounds hoarse, wild. It seeks affirmation in its own echo. It's like a bird call in the mountains. But these words I utter now in Russian. They're alien, dead. We have enemies within. We must fight and die. The Dive said, a slave who doesn't try to free himself deserves to be enslaved a second time. Now I just need to shout, there is no God but Allah. But I don't have time. A bullet scorches my chest. As I lose consciousness, I activate the explosive device. I've achieved martyrdom. You're such a liar, shouted Islam, a boy I didn't like, as he clambered out from behind the dustbin, armed with a toy submachine gun. He was the chief of the president's guards, and in the game, he was called Ivan. I got suspicious and killed you before you could do anything. I'm old school KGB. You didn't have time to activate the detonator. But the bomb went off all the same and everyone around was killed. You can't talk, you're dead. You're dead too, Polina, you silly, retorted Katya, a sniper. She was sitting on the roof of a shed covered with a large net that had been used to store potatoes and watermelons in the old days before the war. The sun was glaring straight into her eyes, making her squint. No, Polina's right. We won, wailed my friend Chava, whose hands were tied. She wriggled and writhed at the unfairness of it. I rushed to untie her, although I was supposed to be in paradise, being greeted by angels. You're not allowed to do that, Islam Ivan howled, and fired at us with his submachine gun. Rat-a-tat-tat. So then the Chechen Mohammed crawled out from the grass and gave him a kick. Probably, on that sunny June day in 1996, we would have gone on squabbling until evening about who was right and who was wrong, if it were not for Anya's mother, Auntie Zhenya. 9-year-old Anya was pretending to be an alien spaceship, observing the actions of pitiful little human beings from high up in the sky, and she didn't take sides. Auntie Zhenya looked down from her balcony and saw the whole gang of us in the huddle by the garage, arguing about who was a rebel and who was a Russian soldier, and about how to attain martyrdom. Who wants jam sandwiches? She shouted. That's it. I'll leave you to read the rest of it.
Thank you, Irina. It's a really great story. I can't wait for the rest of the collection to make its way into English. Wonderfully evocative of childhood and of a horrible situation all at once. And on that same note, another one of those links, those mysterious coincidences. If I may introduce Lena Wolf. Lena, is it possible for you to turn on your camera? If you're still here. Yes, you're still here. There you are. Lena, could I ask you to maybe share a little bit of your own story and tell us about the background?
Yes, hi. Thank you everyone for having me here. I was the one who invited people from New Zealand and Canada and England and Germany. And I think I invited pretty much everyone who I knew because it's quite, it's my first short story that was published. So I'm quite excited about it. So I am, so my name's Lena Wolf. I grew up in Kazakhstan as part of German minority. And so we were German people who lived on Russian land since the times of Catherine the Great. So that's by the time I was there, probably about 200 years. And I think, so most of the time what I try to cover in my short stories is really the experience of what it means to be German, a German child, and mostly write from a child perspective, what it means to be German in a country that suffered so much because of the war, and but also what it means to belong. So this is one of those stories. It's about military training at school, and it's really about her, Lena, this girl, trying to make sense of the society and the people around her, and actually her getting on quite well with her friends, but it's more the adults. It's more the adults who still feel the trauma of the past and search for someone to blame. I guess that's what it is about. So it's called Hostile Territory. That's me. Would you like to know a little bit more? Should I just start? Yes, okay. The story is called Hostile Territory. When I was at school, my favorite subject was target shooting. I enjoyed both handgun and rifle shooting. I did enjoy grenade throwing as well. However, due to my slightly shorter size, the second smallest in the class, I could never quite get the mandatory 25 meters throw, no matter how hard I trained. Target shooting was a different story, and my height in this case seemed to work to my advantage. I spent hours training, and by the end of that first year, I was fast, I was accurate, and I was deadly. The basic military training at school started when we were 14, and our teacher, Sergei Sergeyevich, had only recently come to Kazakhstan and was new to our school. He was a proud member of the Communist Party, our only party, and described himself as a Soviet patriot. This was not unusual, as we all wanted to grow up to become party members, and we were all proud patriots. Both his father and grandfather fought fascist Germany in the Second World War, and both of them gave their lives for the country. And nothing less was expected of us when the right time came. The basic military training lessons always took place in the reinforced bunker in the cellar of our school building, unless we did grenade throwing, which was always on the athletic track field. The reinforced bunker was there in case the Americans declared nuclear war on our country, and the bunker would be the place where we, the pupils of the school, would survive and then go on and fight for our country. We all knew that the nuclear attack happened. We all knew that if the nuclear attack happened, some of our parents would not survive unless there was a bunker at their workplace as well. In my case, I was lucky. My mom's job was to manage a team of economists at the sports city, which was a city within a city, and apart from having great training facilities to train future Soviet athletes to make our country proud, it also had its own school, its own shop, a stolovaya, a utilitarian canteen, and a bunker. And in my dad's case, he was a long distance bus driver. I mean, a really long distance driver, like Kazakhstan long distance. Each job took him 2,000 kilometers away and sometimes all the way to Russia and to Siberia. I imagined him driving to the east of Kazakhstan, to the magnificent Tian Shan mountains. Our part of Kazakhstan was more flat, which would offer him much needed protection from the nuclear radiation. And so he could survive, join other survivors, and be ready to fight. I was lucky and I was prepared. One of the first lessons that we did with Sergei Sergeyevich was first aid and how to bandage various types of injuries. We covered a hand injury, a bullet wound to the shoulder, a broken leg, and a head injury from a grenade splinter. I volunteered to be the person with the forehead injury. I thought it was possibly the most difficult one to treat and maybe also the most patriotic one because it would bleed a lot. And as I walked to the blackboard where the bandaging instructions took place, I imagined myself to be someone who had just saved a mother and a child or an elderly person from a certain death by risking my own life. We needed a second volunteer to do the bandaging of my head, and I could see my friend Oksana slowly raising her hand, but then putting it down again as someone in the class asked Sergei Sergeyevich whether they should help a German if the war really happened, and what to do if there are several other injured people, like a fellow Russian or Ukrainian or a Kazakh, someone shouted. Is it not our duty to help a fellow Russian first before helping a German? All of us looked at Sergei Sergeyevich expecting an answer, but he remained silent. He was not a man of many words, nor was he a man of action. And he firmly believed that every single situation is preparation for the imminent war. And so it was for us to sort it out without anyone's help. He did not say that in words, but we all understood it. We should help a fellow Russian first, the class agreed. I only got the head injury because I risked my own life to save someone, I told them. And besides, I'm bleeding to death here while you're talking down there, and there's nobody else who's injured. Is it not your duty to help the injured? But the discussion continued as they analyzed the order in which the injured should be helped. First, they would help any injured from the Soviet republics. They discussed whether all Soviet nationalities would be equal in getting first aid, and that they agreed that yes, a fellow Kazakh or Uzbek and fellow Russian will have the same first aid status because all nationalities within the Soviet Union are equal. Also, this was more practical as they would not need to ask for a passport every time before giving first aid. The next would be the fellow communist countries like Poland and China, Mongolia and Cuba, just to name a few, as they would be in the war as well, fighting alongside the Soviet Union to defend communism. I looked at the Polish kid in our class. He was looking down at his desk, not engaging. He was safe. They continued by clarifying that they would help a German if the German was from the Democratic Republic of Germany. Which Germany are you from, they asked. From the Kazakh one, I told them. I grew up here. But you weren't born here, right? It doesn't matter, I told them. I would be fighting for our country, and being the best in our class would probably be saving all your lives. I can keep on going.
No, that's perfect, Lena. Thank you very much. I was really struck by the resonance between the story we just heard from Irina and the story that you contributed. And I think it really helps round out the picture of what we're trying to do with Cardinal Points, which is present, as the title would suggest, all points on the map of that territory that we call our own for the purposes of the journal, Central and Eastern Europe, as well as Central Asia. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us and for sharing your translations. Irina has something to say.
I just want to say that in the end, first of all, thank you to everyone, to all the authors of this issue and all our authors, and especially you all. It was wonderful, I think. And I want to thank Boris, who has been co-editor since 2011, I think, and has been the editor-in-chief of Cardinal Points for a couple of years, and without whom, I think, had it not been for Boris's passionate involvement and knowing what kind of workload he has at healthcare, it's just amazing. Had it not been for his even presence and certainly his work at the helm of Cardinal Points, we wouldn't have been here, I'm sure, because regular periodical publication is an endeavor. It's a lot. People normally don't understand what goes in this little word periodical. Periodical is it's your commitment, and sometimes it's too much. But with Boris, everything seems easy and elegant, and this work of weaving together these all different voices and themes and motifs, which is the magic of any journal, and which is why we're doing it. Thank you, Boris, and Robert, our co-editor, Robert Chandler, whom I don't see here, but who,
Yes.
yeah,
And the only reason that this journal exists, it's true that I play a role in compiling the contents. It's true that I play a role in weaving it together, but the only reason we can hold it in our hands is because of Irina's continued commitment. And thank you everyone who is part of this fabric. Thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. And if not, we can call this a successful launch and sail along into 2022. Thank you.
Thank you all. And Regina, thank you again.